Sweet, okay. I can now speak. I can't speak without any notes. As Michelle mentioned, my name is Rhett. A little bit about me. I think we have like a super ugly slide with some info there. Yes, okay. So that's me on the bottom left in my natural habitat. I am West Plano born and raised. Went to the Christian private school, worked at Chick-fil-A, the full Plano experience. You know I had to do it to I do have some experiences that are less West Plano that I can tell you all about sometime. One time I had to hide from a drug dealer in a Motel 6. That was kind of interesting. That's a true story. I went to UTD. I got my degree in marketing in 2017, and since then, I have been a pastor with Focus. I spent 1 year up at Denton at UNT, and then I came back here. And guys, I know UTD is super different from UNT. We're very math-oriented here. They're very artsy, and I'm here to tell you they're even weirder than you think they are. And so am I. I love getting to know students. I love getting to see God at work in students' lives. It's a privilege to get to preach. Because fun fact about preaching is that the person who learns the most from the sermon is the person giving it. Because you start writing stuff and you're like, gosh, am I worthy to talk about this? And it makes you think a lot. Here are some more things about me. So again, that's me. That's my wife to my right. Again, a real picture of a real person who I am in fact married to. Her name is Kaylee. We got married last summer. One of the many things she does is that she is a medical clown. So she's a clown at a children's hospital. So there she is in her full clown regalia. That's how she wants to be known. I like ice cream. That is our cat named Captain. He is not to scale. He's not 5'8". I like basketball. Yeah, not to scale. The ice cream cone is too big if that's to scale. Been Texas my whole life, and that's a microphone. That's there to signify that, one, I love microphones, and that's true. And then two, I really love rap music. Listening to it, writing it, analyzing it, and performing it. There you go. Although that mic's not plugged in, so that wouldn't work too good. And one thing that a lot of people do not know about me is that I really like riddles. So back when I worked at Chick-fil-A, me and my manager would we had this app that was a year of riddles, but really it was just 365 riddles. You could do them all in one day if you could do them, and we would read one and then kind of work, my pleasure, and then try and solve it in our heads. We'd come back and be like, tree, and we're like, oh my gosh, it's tree, yeah. So we're gonna start out with a riddle. So, I am one small, simple word. If you find something good in this world and dig deep enough, you'll find me. I am the reason for your salvation. I am the single thread that, when pulled, ushers in the kingdom of heaven. What am I?
Yahweh.
The guy running the slides, Josh, he raised his hand. You don't get to do it. Yeah, just sit and think for a little bit. Just sit and think for a little bit. You can reread it if you want. All right. The answer is obedience. There are probably other things that could fit there. I heard some Yahweh, I heard some Jesus. But the answer here today is obedience. I have another riddle for y'all, actually. So it's a little shorter. I'm considered a bad word in 2022. What am I? Obedience, yes, okay, here we go. One last riddle. Y'all are getting the hang of it. I start with the letter O, and I give you the chance to go somewhere better in life. What am I? Go for it. Opportunity! The rest of y'all.
Hey, I said Obama.
The rest of y'all. That's matches his messaging pretty well. Yeah. Yeah. The rest of y'all are a bunch of sheeple. I expect you to think on your feet a little bit better going forward. But seriously, okay. Yeah. Today we are going to be talking about obedience, and I'm not going to be shy about this. My hope is that by the time you walk out of the room tonight, that you will want to dedicate yourself to obeying God a little bit more every day. There you go. I could, stop preaching right now, and y'all would know kind of what we're getting at. So yeah, my goal is for you to want to dedicate yourself to obeying God a little bit more every day. Because, when I was writing this sermon, God, and not for the first time, He used the process of writing this to transform my attitude towards obedience from a mixture of avoiding the topic of obedience and kind of a little bit of fear to honestly an attitude of excitement about obedience, which is a weird thing to think about, being excited about obedience. And I believe that all God wants for me to do in the next 20 minutes or so is just to share that and to hopefully share how I feel, get y'all to feel the same way. So if you walk out of this room and you're not excited about obedience, then either I have failed at preaching, or, as we saw earlier with the opportunity riddle, you have failed at listening. Or both. I feel like, have y'all ever been on YouTube and forgotten to have ad blocker, maybe on your phone, and you get an ad and it's like, do you do cardio hoping to get more shredded? It's like, that doesn't work. I have a secret way that you can get stronger. And it's always like the secret sauce thing. So it's like the fitness secret sauce, or for investing, it's like, don't work your 9 to 5. I have this secret thing that's not drop shipping, and it's not this, and it's not that. And watch my seminar, and you'll learn the secret to success financially. And you're like, gosh, man, I don't trust you. I feel like obedience, when you actually properly understand it and contextualize it, is kind of this forgotten recipe for a better life, right? It's kind of a little bit of a secret sauce thing where it's like not too many people think about it, not too many people focus on it, and there's a lot of power in obedience. But what is y'all's first response to the idea of obedience? What's the, we don't like it. Young people especially don't like obedience. And guess what? I'm young people. I'm still pretty young, right? I'm right on the cusp between Gen Z and millennial. So I feel that too. Obedience, this is a little interpretive part of it. I think we're afraid that the idea of obeying puts our head in this box, right? Where we no longer think for ourselves, we no longer see the world around us. It implies submitting to authority. And if there's one thing that our generation is good at, it's not trusting authority, right? We have a long legacy of that. America was literally built off of a revolution. It was built off of not submitting to authority. And then a lot of the things that have changed America have been around not submitting to the aspects of authority that are not good. We build our entire identities around disobeying what we believe is bad authority, disobeying bad norms, right? So for some people in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s or 90s or the 2010s or today, disobeying authority when it comes to sexual norms, that can be something that we build ourselves around. Disobeying authority on gender norms, disobeying authority that we believe is corrupt, right? If you look at both sides of the political aisle, one side would say, I don't trust large government I'm going to disobey any authority that I believe is trying to meddle in my business and meddle in my taxes, right? And on the other side of the aisle would say, look how corrupt police are. I don't trust that authority, right? But either way, people build their entire political identities out of what kind of authority do I not like, right? And I'm not saying that the distrust of authority is necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying that, right? Because I think a lot of authority in our lives has proven that it's worthy of being distrusted. And I think our generation is uniquely poised to distrust authority because we live in the the information age, and like we have been disillusioned so many times. You know, yeah, I just feel like you grow up and you learn certain history in school, and then you just learn all these different things about different wars and different presidents and what they're actually like, and you're like, oh, we the good guys? I don't think we're the good guys, man. Yeah, and it's like we've been disillusioned so much because we've had access to information that so many people haven't, right? And so we've had a lifetime's worth of disillusionment by the time we're 10. And again, so many movements now are from pointing out aspects of authority that's genuinely bad, right? So the Me Too movement is pointing out, like, look how people use their power structures to take advantage of people, right? The West becoming less religious and kind of questioning the church. Again, it's like, look at how y'all have used power. I don't trust that, right? And there's so many church scandals that are kind of at the forefront of our minds that it's like, geez, like, why would I trust Christian authority, right? And the world is changing at a rate where it can feel like our parents' generation just has no clue what's going on, right? And we don't have a clue what's going on, but it's like, man, like, growing up as a kid, you feel like, okay, my parents, they get it. They know what's going on, so whatever they say goes because I trust them. And then you grow up and you're like, dang, man, does anyone really know what's going on? Like, the world's kind of crazy. Like, it's completely different from how it was a decade ago. So, a lot of the issues with authority I've just described, and a lot of what you see people talking about, a lot of it's true, or at least understandable. Like, you can look and you can see where that distrust for authority comes from in our generations, right? But I don't believe that attitude towards authority, and of course, because of that attitude towards obedience, I don't believe it's based on the full picture. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'm gonna drink water. Yeah, so we have a lot of reasons around us to believe that obedience won't lead to anything good. Because obedience, it requires trusting that the person telling you to do something, one, knows more than you do, and then two, has your best interest at heart, right? And for one, I think we've seen a lot of authority in our lives who maybe didn't have people's best interest at heart, and then for another, it is human to distrust people and to not think that they know more than you do, right? So it can be really hard to trust that there are people in my life who know more than I do and have my best interest at heart. And on top of that, like in college, you're in the season of life where you're moving out, and you're supposed to, at least from what the culture says, transition from obeying your parents or your teachers to kind of obeying yourself. You know what I mean? So growing up, your reality, what you can and cannot do, where you can and cannot go, when you can and cannot be awake, that's determined by your parents. And then suddenly you get to college and you're like, yeah, like, I have classes and I should be at those at certain times. But there's no one here telling me to do anything, really. Like, I am being the one in charge of what I do and do not do, and when I do and do not do it, right? Which is a crazy transition. And so because of that, obedience, which I'm about to talk about why it's so important, is something that I think we turn a blind eye to a lot. But let me tell you about Jesus. And yeah, I want to talk about him from a different angle from what I think we're used to. But I want to remind us that our theme for this year is come and see, right? And I think the idea of come and see implies a certain humility and openness on our part, right? That Jesus is inviting us to come and see him, right? And come and see what it's like to follow him. But what we want to do is kind of come and like talk about one aspect of him, right? But seeing, that's just a sense. He's saying, place yourself in my vicinity, open your eyeballs and see what you see, and then try and make sense of that, right? But we want to ignore certain aspects of him. So if we're really going to take come and see seriously, I want to encourage us to really come and really see who Jesus is, see what he has to show us. As Christians, we believe Jesus lived the best life that anyone has ever lived. And in fact, we believe as Christians that Jesus lived the most revolutionary life that anyone has ever lived. But have you actually thought about the fact that Jesus also lived the most submissive, obedient, dutiful life that anyone has ever lived? That's kind of crazy. So yeah, let me tell you about Jesus and how obedient he is. Let's start with him being born, for one, as a human being. Jesus, if we believe, as Christians theologically, that he's a member of the Trinity and that in some way he was present at the beginning of creation, and that he chose to be born as a human, that implies already a level of submissiveness and humility that's kind of hard to comprehend, right? But you can imagine kind of working your way up in life and then choosing to live in like the worst living conditions possible in order to help people, and that might be a fraction of what it must have been like to essentially be in heaven and then go be born from a illegitimate seeming teenage pregnancy from an abused people in a time where we didn't have a lot of comforts technologically, right? In Philippians 2, Paul frames Jesus choosing to become flesh and blood as an act of submission. We'll get into that later. But we would also be remiss to miss the fact that the gospel writers don't tell us much about Jesus' parents, Mary and Joseph. But it seems like one of the things that made them the people that God said, you know what, I want my son to be born to them. I want them to be my son's parents. It seems to be their obedience. That is one thing that the Gospels really emphasize. So Luke 1:38, the angel appears to Mary and is like, hey, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have a son. You're going to name him Emmanuel. He tells her what's going to happen. And it's a lot and probably pretty scary to think about. And all she says is, she asks a question, and then she says, I'm the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled. That's just straight up obedience. Essentially, I trust you, so I'm going to go along with what you say. Matthew 1:24-25 tells us about Joseph. And again, an angel of the Lord speaks to him. It says, when Joseph woke up, he did exactly what the angel of the Lord had commanded him to do and took Mary home as his wife. Because essentially, Joseph finds out that she's pregnant, and he's like, well, we didn't do the make you pregnant thing. And that's like super, that's a no-go, especially in that culture, right? And so what he's going to do is try and just quietly divorce her to not draw attention to what he believes is her cheating on him. And the angel essentially says, no, this child is not from her doing that. It's from the Lord. I want you to marry her and go along with this. And Joseph does exactly that, which implies a lot of trust and a lot of obedience. The only story of Jesus as a child, when he's in the temple and he's like, his parents are like, where were you? I'm in my father's house. Right after that, Luke 2:51-52, this is the only description of Jesus before he started his ministry when he was like 30. It says, then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart. Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. So yeah, the thing we learn about Jesus like one of the few details we get of him as a child is that he was obedient to his parents. And then we get how Jesus describes himself. So in John 5, this is one of the verses that we have read, I believe. It says, Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees, and he says, "Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees his Father doing. Because whatever the Father does, the Son also does." Which is crazy, because that's like, to me, that's the peak of obedience. It's not just when you say to do something, I'm going to do it. It's, I'm only going to do what I see you doing. Like, everything I do is going to be determined by you. You see how that's like obedience plus platinum edition? Like, that's crazy. And Jesus would also consistently pause in his ministry to go be with God. And I think a lot of this was because being with his Father was home to him, and where he kind of found himself and was rejuvenated. But I also believe that he would go to his Father for direction, that he would go to prayer for direction on what to do. And you can see this in Mark 1. So Jesus has just been healing people all night. The paralyzed man is lowered through the roof. He heals him. It's after that happens. And it says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. And Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone's looking for you!" And Jesus replied, "Let's go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I have come." So they traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogue, driving out demons. Do you notice how Jesus is in the midst of doing something in one place, and he goes and he talks to God, and then he kind of gets up from that, and he's like, okay, yes, the reason I'm here is to go do that. And then he goes and does that, right? So he's checking in with God. He's not just waiting for God to give him a new command. He's actively going and trying to figure out, hey, I want to be obedient. I want to do what you say. I trust you. What's up? What are we going to do next? And not only was Jesus obedient, the Bible actually describes him as growing in obedience, which is crazy to think about because we believe that he was sinless, but somehow his capacity for obedience, his understanding of obedience, the level of sacrifice he was willing to go through, expanded throughout his life. So Hebrews 5:8 and following says, "Son though he was," so even though he was God's son, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, and was designated by God to be the high priest in the order of Melchizedek. Don't worry about the order of Melchizedek stuff right now. That's its own thing. But did you notice that? I think that's a verse we gloss over, but that's kind of crazy. It says that once made perfect through learning obedience, then Jesus became the source of eternal salvation to everyone. Implying that Jesus' obedience is the reason that we have salvation. Not just, oh, Jesus is perfect and he died for us, but it keys in on, because of his obedience, he became the source of salvation. That's what I was getting at with that very long riddle at the beginning there. And then at Jesus' most important moment, when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's really thinking about, okay, I'm about to be arrested and tried, and I'm going to have to die on the cross, right? As he's thinking about that, it's again obedience that kind of keeps him going towards what he knows he needs to do. Matthew 26:39 says, "Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, 'My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will.'" So essentially, if there's any other way, please let's do that way. But even at this point, I trust you and I'm going to do what you say is best. So when the feelings of fear for Jesus overwhelmed any feelings of excitement or even like a feeling of love for people, the thing that kind of kept him going through that was holding on to obedience to his Father. So yeah, Jesus dedicated himself to obeying God a little bit more every day. He only did what he saw his Father doing, and it upturned every part of his life constantly. He lived a totally different life from the one he could have made for himself. He was a carpenter. I'm sure that was a sought-after trade. But he chose to go around essentially homeless, making a lot of enemies and frenemies. And he chose to have every part of his life upturned constantly from obedience. And doing that, we believe, changed the course of history. It brought in the kingdom of heaven. It made salvation for us possible. And Jesus' obedience has changed the course of my life. But we don't talk about it. And do y'all see how, do you see how crazy it is that we don't talk about Jesus' obedience? And how constant of a theme that is? And the theme of obedience goes deeper than that in Scripture. The word for obey in Hebrew is asa. A-S-A is like the way it's transliterated. And it's used constantly. This word for obey is used constantly. And that word is also the word for to make or to do. It's just like central to their theology. So in the beginning, in Genesis, God's like, let's make, water, and let's make sky. And that's the same word. It's like reality is obeying God, right? Creation exists because reality asad God. And God even describes obedience to his people as the difference between life and death. A strong claim. Deuteronomy 30, this is after the most entertaining part of the Bible, where God has been giving them a lot of different commandments about holidays and worship, and he's like, okay, when you get to the promised land, you're going to want to do this, don't do that. All these different commands, and he says, now what I'm commanding you today is not too difficult for you or beyond your reach. It's not up in heaven so that you have to ask, who will ascend into heaven to get it and proclaim it to us so we may obey it? Nor is what I'm commanding you beyond the sea, so you have to ask, who will cross the sea to go get it and proclaim it to us so we may obey it? No, the word is very near to you. It is in your mouth and it's in your heart so that you may obey it. See, I set before you today life and prosperity or death and destruction. For I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to keep his commands, his decrees, his laws. Then you will live and increase, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land you're entering. But if your heart turns away and you're not obedient, and if you're drawn away to bow down to other gods and worship them, I declare to you this day that you will certainly be destroyed. You will not live long in the land you're crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. This day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God, listen to his voice, and hold fast to him. For the Lord is your life. He will give you many years in the land he swore to give your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Obedience is so central to what it means to be a Christian that a lot of times writers in the Bible refer to followers of Jesus or to Christians as those who obey Jesus. So Hebrews 5:10 says Jesus offers eternal life to those who obey him. Romans 1:5, Paul's talking about how he wants to share the gospel with the Gentiles who don't have the gospel yet. And he describes sharing the gospel with them as calling them to the obedience that comes from God. Not typically how I share the gospel. I'm like, hey y'all, you want to be obedient to somebody? That's not how I think about it, right? In the riddle at the beginning, I said about obedience that if you find something good in this world and you dig deep enough, you'll find it. If you find something good in this world and dig deep enough, you'll find obedience. Yeah, obedience, I think, is really, for me personally, the only thing that has kept me where I need to be. Obedience is the thing that has made me who I am today. Obviously, I have a lot of weaknesses and issues in my heart, but I think the only reason that I can even stand here as a pastor in any capacity is obedience. I was reflecting on that carrying me through the last several years. And I was just thinking about the number of times that, as a pastor, I've wanted to just quit. Either permanently or for that day. Just not show up. Like I'm sure a lot of you do. I struggle a lot with anxiety and depression. When I think about the last several years, more often than not, the year is kind of defined by a struggle with just trying to stay in a good headspace and have the energy to keep going. You're not being kind of, on the verge of a panic attack for a lot of the day. And I can't tell you how many times in the moment there has not been sort of an intuition of like, I feel like doing this. I feel like being here. I feel like, going and confronting this person while I'm also kind of on the verge of a panic attack. I feel like doing it, right? I can't tell you how many times it's literally just been like, God, I believe that you have called me to do this, and I believe you're good, so I'm going to obey that. And I can tell you that the times where the last thread being obedience and me holding on to that has carried me through, those times have been the ones where I see the most fruit around me, and I see the most growth in me. And I would encourage you to ask any Christian you look up to, ask them the question, what's a time in your life when obedience was the only thing that kept you going? And I promise you that if you give them a second, they will have an answer to that question. I even called my parents. My dad picked up, and I asked him, I was like, what was a time in your life where obedience was the only thing that kept you going? And he kind of thought about it for a while, and he's like, not a ton of times stick out because like me and your mom didn't talk about that. We were just kind of like, we're going to focus on obeying God over what we want to do. And he's like, when you have been kind of trained in God to do that, like that's the way you see things. And I was like, goodness. I was like, I hope I get to a point in my life where obedience to God is kind of the default, like, don't need to ask about it, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm focused on. But yeah, it was just so interesting that he was sort of like, I asked the question, he goes, yeah. Just sort of, it's like, that's my main mode of operation. But yeah, so learning to love obedience can be a missing piece, though, in so much that we want. I think I'm at risk in talking about obeying God in the midst of hard times, or obeying God when He calls you to something hard, as painting an obedient life as one with no joy, one with no adventure. And I think that's the opposite of what's true. And again, I'm sure some of you can relate, like, just because you struggle with anxiety does not mean that you cannot also have a really meaningful life, and one that has a lot of joy in it. So again, if you want to grow as a person and get to become someone that you have not been before, learn to love obedience. A lot of us as Christians are into the spiritual disciplines, of like, man, like I want a more robust prayer life, and I want to be transformed through my prayer life. And I can tell you that when you read contemporary books about prayer and about spiritual growth, and then you go and read the books that inspired those books from the actual monks and the actual people who really led to the spiritual disciplines, the biggest difference is submission. I just finished a class in seminary on Celtic theology, and one of the big things that came up over and over again was submission. That they basically said, like, if you don't even know anyone who's necessarily all that much more mature than you, it's still good for you to submit to them for the sake of submitting to them. I was like, what the heck? Right? Yeah, they said when you place yourself under someone else's, essentially under their authority, choose the flame that spares you the least. Meaning, like ask the person, ask your mentor, and ask God, like, hey, I want you to challenge me a lot. I don't want this to be a safe relationship where you just let me do me and you never ask me to do anything, ask me to change. If you want to have something to say in the world, have something to say to the world, learn obedience. If you read the prophets, who are the people where God's people are just going insane, they're not doing the right thing, the prophets are the only people getting it right, it's always obedience, right? Isaiah is called to obedience. Jeremiah is called to obedience. And again, if you want to live a life that's revolutionary in your time and leads to life, learn to be obedient to God. I think that the people who changed the world the most, even if they were revolutionary against the bad power, structures of power they saw around them, were very obedient to God. Like you read MLK's writings and his sermons, and he believes in civil disobedience. But when it comes to his relationship with God, that man was obedient. God's the one who called him to do what he did, right? And I think, we have to get that right. So my question for you tonight is, what would happen if you dedicated yourself to obeying God a little bit more every day? What would happen if you dedicated yourself to obeying God a little bit more every day? I think, first of all, you would have to have something to obey, right? So you would learn to listen for God's voice and think of God's voice as active and relevant in your life right now, right? So you would learn to read the scripture, not just to kind of learn some cool facts or hold it at arm's length or judge it, but you'd actually let scripture read you and say, what is God commanding me to do? You would learn to hear God's voice and his commandments through the people around you, right? Where when a friend who loves Jesus and cares about you a lot, challenges you on something, you would see the voice of God in that and say, man, maybe God's calling me to be more patient with people through this. Maybe God's calling me to be more bold. You'd even learn to listen for God's voice from the Spirit, right? You learn to listen for God's voice to you as you go about your day. Go and talk to that person. Hey, you need to pause. You need to be with me for now. You learn to listen for that. So you learn to listen, then you learn to die. I think you see obedience feels like a little death because it's saying, not my will, your will, right? Jesus describes it as picking up your cross and denying yourself. That's how he describes following him, it feels like a death to give up the agency that we try our whole lives to really find and give it to God. That feels like a little death. But perhaps your little death just looks like changing majors. Perhaps it's ending a relationship that you don't need to be in, or ending a habit you don't need to be in. Maybe it's starting a new relationship, or doing something you're deathly afraid of. Maybe there's someone that God's been laying on your heart to reach out to and care about for a long time, and you've been like, well, I have social anxiety, so that means no obedience for me. It's like maybe it looks like doing that. You'll learn to listen to God, you'll die, but then I think if you dedicate yourself to obeying God a little more every day, you will live. Like you will experience life to a different level than you have before. Because again, obedience is only worth it when someone knows better than you do and has your best interest at heart. And God knows way better than we do, and God has our best interest at heart. I really believe that. In John 7, Jesus says, whoever believes in me, as Scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from within them. And I think evidence of obedience being worth it and God having our interest at heart in obedience, literally as I was about to share this sermon, I was feeling a little bit jittery, had a long couple months, was feeling exhausted. And Jaden Seal, who was up there during worship, said, hey, I felt compelled to share this. He texted me. And he sent me Psalm 23, 5 through 6, which says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This was not staged. There was a little moment where someone who follows Jesus felt a nudge from God saying, hey, do this. And God did that because he cares about me, and he wants me to know that he cares about me, and he cares about Jaden, and he wants Jaden to know that he can use him to bless other people. And so a little act of obedience had that much life-giving power to it. So because God is that good and obedience is that powerful, my plea to you tonight is dedicate yourself to obeying God a little bit more every day. That's it. So 1 point. So I'm going to pray for us. Worship team, y'all can go ahead and come out. God, thank you so much for how good you are, how faithful you are, and just that we don't have to figure everything out, that we get to, rather than trying to be perfect, we get to just focus on your voice and focus on obeying you. I ask that whatever change of heart needs to happen in us to teach us to be obedient, that you would do that. And I thank you for the patience that I know you'll have as you teach us obedience. It's in my prayer. Amen.
Amen.